So this is Web3 Whispers with Mathias and
Steeb. How you guys doing?
perfect. We nailed it. That was our first
Yeah,
one.
we're
So that
gonna
was
we're gonna
good.
figure that one. We're gonna figure that one out. Make that a little bit smoother next time.
Yeah, that's always fun. That's a fun part of doing the pod. Like just kind of
Mhm.
randomly stumble through shit and then it's
Yeah,
good.
we got to keep you guys on your toes. We're never gonna do the same intro twice.
Yeah, we might change the name again. So it's always fun.
Oh, true. Yeah. I mean, if you haven't noticed, we changed the podcast name. We've transitioned from crypto and coffee to Web3 Whispers. Another fun little alliteration.
We might even add a little interesting intro music as well. Everybody will recognize little George Michael.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys get the play on words and we don't just seem like idiots.
It'll seem weird,
Yeah.
like weird music they have going on.
Exactly.
Oh man, pretty good.
So Matthias and I were on a call today with a cool Web3 platform, Bubble World. Matthias, you want to talk a little bit about them?
Yeah, so we actually are going to be partnering with Bubble World to get some whitelists. We got some whitelists for our community at Shogun World, Shogun War. Maybe we'll change it to Shogun World now with
Yeah,
the
just changing all the
combination with.
names.
Yeah, we're changing everything up. Well, they're really interesting. I actually, full disclosure, I'm going to be investing with them. They're amazing. I plan on minting. But they kind of the takeaway, the short version of what they do. For me, I know they have a different take on it, but for me, it's basically an easy way for a lot of Web two or institutional personalities and different stuff like that to actually bridge over to Web three. So it's a nice, easy platform, kind of like a white glove service for a lot of different influencers and celebrities and big, even Web3 projects as well to launch on their platform.
Hmm.
And I'll post the info deck for sure in the chat and stuff sometime here. But um, I mean, they have a ton of good investors. You got to check out the info, but I'll let you know what a few of the investors are
They got
here.
I know they got Pharrell, Post Malone,
David
um,
Guetta, I think
David. Oh yeah.
Steve Aoki. I know people were memeing like Steve Aoki's the top, but it's pretty funny. I saw that. Like, why is that? Like, it's not actually really accurate, but it's pretty funny though.
Yeah, I heard him. He
Um,
did he did an interview and he was like, "Yeah, everyone's been memeing me about buying at the top," and I was just like, "Dude, feel so bad for the guy."
yeah, some of these guys are just like when you're rich or whatever, like you don't really care too much. I mean, there's two people I think that don't care if they buy the top. If you're really wealthy or you have high conviction, like 100% conviction that this is and you're willing to hold for the next 10 years,
Yeah, and it's funny
then
too
it doesn't really
because
matter.
yeah, and it's funny too because I think Steve Aoki is like, at least we know for one he is rich, but
Yeah,
his explanation was like conviction. Basically, he was basically just saying
yeah.
like, I believe in the projects that I'm investing in, so I'm not really waiting for the price to drop because I don't think they will. Which
Hmm.
I mean, those are just words. He might actually believe that, he might not, but like that's true. I mean, that's the type of person that doesn't really care where they buy it in at because they know that or at least they believe that the project's going to be going up.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everybody has to have that kind of conviction. Um, like if you're in Web3, it's very hard to kind of stick around without like a high level of conviction because it's
Yeah.
just so risky and yeah,
Exactly.
it gets a little crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But
but yeah,
anyways,
so
on
I'm
the
gonna
on
go.
the on the note of Bubble World, guys, they gave us some. I don't know if you already mentioned this, Matthias, but they gave us
Mm,
some with Shogun Wars, Matthias mentioned, and we're going to be doing a whitelist spot giveaway at the end of the podcast. So we're going to ask a question at the end of the podcast, and when I post the thread with the link to the podcast episode, give it a listen. At the end of the podcast, there'll be a question. Retweet the Twitter post and answer the question in the comments, and you guys will be entered into the raffle.
perfect.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I did a great job of explaining that simply, but hopefully the people listening to this can,
I think people will figure it out. They'll follow
yeah,
the
can
herd and then they'll
decrypt what I
see
was
like,
saying.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm speaking in Da Vinci Code language. Like I need to probably be a little bit
It's
more
another
succinct.
layer to it,
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's good. Make
exactly.
people really work for the whitelist. And I think
Yeah,
we're gonna have some in the Discord as well, and we're gonna do an AMA with them. So people will get a little bit. You might even want to win the whitelist and then figure out what it is. Because you can always mint or not mint. It's all, up to you. But
yeah.
you want to get on the whitelist first and then figure out if you want
And
it.
that's our plan too going forward. We have a lot of, I mean, I guess probably now I can name them. I mean, we're
Yeah.
going to be speaking to Thales on Thursday, Abacus on Wednesday. I think you guys, if you listen to the first episode, you'll recognize the names. We talked about Thales, the parimutuel markets platform, and we talked about Abacus, it's kind of a string of DeFi platforms. I think the one that stood out the most to me was their valuations. And so we're going to be speaking to both of them this week. We're in the talks with some other projects. So we have a lot of stuff going on. I think we even have Bubble World coming on for a podcast too. So
Yeah, that's gonna be really fun. I was gonna say the one we have that I'm actually really excited, except for all of them I'm excited for, but jpegged actually just released something. We're trying to get them on as well. I know they're super busy, so
yeah, I saw that. That's awesome.
yeah, it should be really cool. I think it's a little bit of a sleeper project. I mean, I know it's popular because Tetranode's an advisor,
Mm-hmm.
but I think people are still sleeping on it a little bit. Like there's kind of two phases to it too. I'll just go into a real quick like
Yeah, go into it.
explanation. But basically, it's a lending platform for NFTs, right?
Right,
So
saw that.
they have their mechanism, and it's an interesting mechanism, but it's a little different than the others. And they have some like price oracles. They're basically using oracles to make sure the price is
Mm-hmm.
good. And I think you can borrow up to I think 33% against the floor price of your JPEG. And I think it's going to be punks first, and then it's going to be apes, and then it's actually I think going to go Azukis,
No
was
way.
nice to see. Yeah,
That's
there's
awesome.
gonna be Azukis and then Clonex and then I think a few others. I think Mutant Apes after that.
Have they
Um,
said anything about rates?
yeah, so it's gonna be a 2% interest rate.
Oh, not bad.
Um,
That's a lot
yeah,
less than
not
you'd be
bad.
paying on the street.
Some of them are like 25%. It's ridiculous. But um, the interesting side that I think a lot of people sleep on is the JPEG cards. Have you heard of these?
Mm-mm. No, that's all new.
So this is like they have a JPEG. So they have NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like funny memes and stuff like that. But you can stake it to the protocol, and you get 1% of the total supply. 1%, I think, is the 1% of total supply every month to that card per card.
No way. That's
So
pretty cool.
yeah, so it's kind of nice. I mean, and then there's actually another function where if it's a cigarette one or whatever, it's just some rarity trait.
Mm-hmm.
You stake it, and if you borrow, it increases your limit. So you can borrow now like up to 40% of the
That's pretty
value.
cool. We're starting to see
Yeah.
a little bit of that unlocking of the liquidity, like you were talking about in the last episode.
Yeah, I really do think that's probably going to be the catalyst for the next like leg up. If we don't get
Yeah.
totally smashed by the Fed
It'll
or
be
something like
interesting to
that.
see how complicated the NFT market gets after NFT loans start to become more popular because there's even though that seems already complex in itself, I feel like the market can make that much more deep and complex as well. I mean, you might start seeing like people lending NFTs, those people lending NFTs, borrowing NFTs, like kind of what we were talking about, like securities lending could end up being
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting because I think they'll make it simple. So people are just like, oh, okay, like I see an opportunity, there's a mint coming. I've got this ape. I'm gonna get, I'm not even gonna get close to my 30% ceiling just in case it drops. I'll get 10 ETH or whatever, just go
Hmm.
mint that, flip it, boom. And that will actually give a lot more velocity to the market.
Yeah, definitely.
'Cause, those guys are going to be in and out real quick. And some people will lose their JPEG, and then it's like, okay, well, you got an ape for, putting your money in there.
Yeah, and a year down the line, kind of seeing what other NFTs they're bringing into the lending platform too will be interesting because the bigger and bigger the supply that they're allowing for lending, I think the more and more liquidity we're going to see being unlocked, and then the more and more liquidity there is, obviously, assuming all things equal, that is a lot more volume.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, and that's one they're going to actually have moonbirds as well.
Oh,
So
awesome! Hell yeah,
yeah,
go
yeah,
Moonbirds!
should be good. Yeah, I know. If unfortunately I'm salty about moonbirds because I missed out, and I was like, no way, it keeps going, and just I faded the moonbirds and have to pay for it now.
Fudded and faded.
Fudded and faded it.
Well, anyways, if you do you want to get into the first article, or you want me to start? How do you want to do this?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So one of the things I was reading, first I started off just reading a couple articles, and then actually Rajan sent me this link with a bunch of different mind maps that were generated from some of the most popular NFT tweets. Um, and one of the mind maps that stood out to me, and I think it's cool. I mean, I think every podcast we do, we definitely should do a couple of specific things, but we should also do a couple general things too, like kind of ideas, things that are a little bit less formed, like how we talked about founder mental health in the first episode. I think in this one, the one mind map that kind of stood out to me that kind of gives us that same sort of theme is 18 lessons from crypto, and I'm not going to go down every single lesson because that would just be very time consuming and not fun for me or you guys. But there's a couple that stood out to me. So probably a good way to start off the podcast with something a little general, and then we could work our way down into the specifics. But so it's an important note that all of these are conservative lessons, so they obviously don't fit everyone's mold. But if you're looking for safety in the space, they're definitely helpful because NFTs and crypto in general, the Web3 space, everything moves so quickly. And I think specifically if you're getting all of your information from Twitter or Discord, it is a lot of clutter to kind of try to compartmentalize. And so
Yeah.
these were just some helpful tips that they talked about. So
Oh, I was
what
gonna
are
say too, like,
mhm.
I just thought of the, I think I saw like a Twitter post by Hentai Senpai the other day that,
Bye.
yeah, he's on there like an
You try
OG,
to
and
say that
he's
name as quick as possible.
as quick as possible. I don't know. We're gonna get like bleep. You don't want to get taken down for all these ones. But he was actually saying like he has like a he's trained himself through trauma, but to basically think about your NFT or your he doesn't do NFTs, but if you could think of this like think of your NFT or your tokens going down in value. Are
Mhm,
you happy that now you can get in a better entry? You can like dollar cost average down,
mhm,
or do you start getting like, oh, this is bad, it could go to zero? Like, do you start getting nervous?
mhm.
Then you're probably over allocated.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, that actually touches on one of the points. Um,
Mm,
it's if you're getting euphoric about a position, it's time to sell. Which, like I said, these are all pretty conservative bullets. Like I think a lot of people were getting euphoric about moonbirds day after, and if they had
yeah.
sold, they probably would have had some some FOMO and definitely regretted it. But I think it is. I think taking your profits is definitely an important note. Like until you actually sell something, you haven't made any money. You know, it's all unrealized.
Mm,
And so I think to a certain extent, it definitely depends on the NFT, the volume of attention that they're getting, the momentum that the NFT has in terms of price increases. But I do think that it's important to kind of self-reflect. I think a lot of people are just moving so quickly in the Web3 space that they don't ever really think about their investments. And so I thought that point was good. I mean, if you are looking at your NFT and you're like, man, I can't believe how high the price has gone. Like this is insane. It's quadrupled in 2 days. Like I
yeah.
never would have seen this coming. Like maybe it's time to kind of start considering taking some profit out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think too, like these will definitely be compartmentalized to like different demographics or different like bag sizes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, exactly. That's
yeah.
the
So if
thing. Is
you're
like I
like,
said, I mean, it's all very like all of these points are very
yeah,
conservative, but I think if someone's looking for some safety, like if they feel very uneasy about their investments, these are some points that might be helpful to kind of help them,
consider too for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I
exactly.
think a lot of these guys, like if you're like a degen or you're trying to hustle to get like make a six-figure bag or whatever, seven-figure bag or
Mhm,
five-figure bag, whatever kind of it is, then you're probably in the camp that should be taking profits and making sure that it's kind of worked into your ideas and your formulas and like
mhm.
you're looking at this kind of stuff. But if you look at it from like a VC standpoint, a lot of these guys, their kind of worst nightmare is like missing the 100x because you took the 10x or
Yeah.
the 15 or whatever it is, like missing the, you got to let your winners ride and stuff like that. But that's, those guys probably don't need advice either. So
Yeah, exactly. I
hopefully
mean,
maybe they'll listen to the pod,
that's
but probably not.
another type of investor too.
Hmm.
If you're uninformed, it's probably time to sell because you don't have the same volume of information. You haven't done the same volume of research as someone that has much more capital, much more means, maybe a lot of people working on their team. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of time to think about whether or not you're going to sell. But another one
Hmm.
too is business case. If you can't explain in 2 sentences where the yield in the DeFi platform you're in comes from, you are the source of yield, which I thought was kind of punchy
Magic.
too. Yeah.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Magic.
Yeah. It just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So I thought that one was cool. And then other one was Twitter as a means for feedback rather than confirmation bias, which I
Mm,
think is definitely thematic given what I've said. Like a lot of times when you're on Twitter, there's so much going on. One of the other points too is like following the right people. Because if you don't follow the right people, there is an information asymmetry,
hmm.
and that information asymmetry is extremely high in Twitter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you have to follow the right people.
For
because
sure. I mean,
that's where
that's
you're.
oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
No, no,
finish that up.
you're good. Go ahead, Matthias.
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, that brings me back to that makes me totally think about like the other thing we were gonna say about like if you're VC or you're a sophisticated investor,
Hmm.
like these guys have information asymmetry. Like they can ping, the founder and be like, hey, are you guys rolling out something soon? Or, like, is there bullish news? Like they can kind of do that. As a retailer, you're really not going to be able to do that. And
Exactly.
then the other thing that maybe you could talk about a little bit too is like they have ways to hedge that are probably not open to like retail or that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people just don't know how to do it. They're just buying spot and hoping it goes up.
Yeah, I mean that's it's kind of like if we're going to talk about hedging a little bit, like one example would be like using Thales or like a parimutuel market as a means to hedge, right?
Hmm.
Like if you have a big position in a coin, say for instance like Ethereum, if you have a big position in Ethereum, right, like and you're long, so meaning you're going to hold it for at least a year, you know that you are confident that the price is going to keep going up, then a way to hedge that would be entering a parimutuel market, like doing betting that the coin is going to go down, and basically your potential for gains is a lot smaller, but so is your potential for loss. So essentially what you're doing is you're minimizing your loss potential and you're minimizing your gain potential. And
Yeah.
so that's just one way to hedge. I mean, there's obviously much more complicated ways to hedge, and I'm sure that a lot of the VCs and Web3 funds are hedging all of their investments because this is investors' money that they're playing with. So it's important
Yeah, for
to
sure.
note. But they also, like you said, they have much more. They have a much larger access to information. They have a lot more resources working under them. At the end of the day, most of the people, the highest volume per capita of investors are going to be just one guy behind a keyboard. It's not going to be like a team of guys behind many keyboards. So I think
Yeah,
for a lot
exactly.
of for a lot of us, it's just decluttering the information that we're getting when we're on Twitter, because I mean,
Hmm.
I'd say this is just a random number, but at least like 80% of the people that you're seeing tweeting about a certain NFT or a certain coin hold that NFT or that coin, so immediately they're biased.
It's probably a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 at least, these guys that
Yeah, it's
yeah.
much. And the thing is too, like if someone holds something, that's also good proof that they believe in it, but it also could
Mhm.
be proof that they're worried about it, so they're trying to get that news out so that people start buying.
You could just be exit liquidity. I mean, that is the problem with a lot of these. They kind of cut both ways,
Hmm.
like there was an example with Alameda. They bought, something that like, okay, we all know VCs are, better, faster, stronger, whatever, they're richer and everything. But something that they were doing was basically they used a bot to get the whole amount in the IDO or
Hmm.
the IPO or whatever of the coin. And then they basically staked that and then took the staking rewards and were just constantly selling
Jesus.
basically until they recoup their whole position. And now it's like free money. It's like a free ride.
Yeah,
And they
that's
were
crazy.
already at a 25 cent, price point getting in.
Hmm.
So their 25 cent entry is now zero. And
Exactly.
and everyone else is like, damn, why is this coin going down all the time? Like, so something to think about.
Definitely, yeah. And the last point that I want to touch on too, which I mean, just from speaking to you, Matthias, it seems like even if
Mhm.
you're not writing it down, it seems like you kind of do this mentally. Is you want to have an investment thesis before you buy. Do your research.
Yeah.
A lot of people we meme research. I think a lot in Web3. Like the average ape is not. It's not doing their research. Obviously, like the extent of their research is going on Twitter and seeing who's tweeting what. But
Hmm.
I think it is important to at least understand the things that I look at when I look at an investment, especially within the Web3 space. Like the easiest thing the team is, and then through who the team is, you can see like what projects they've worked on, if they've worked on projects before, etc. The community, who is focused on this NFT, how active is the community? Does it seem like there's a lot of people that want to hold? Does it seem like there's a lot of people that want this thing to grow over time, not immediately, like paper hands? Um,
Hmm.
and then obviously like you have access to the quality of the NFT, and I'm not speaking like to art, but I think like whether or not they're working in a niche space or if they're doing something that's already been done before.
Yeah, I think we could even break down some of these or give a few examples and stuff like that. Like on the team, if you're looking at team and what they've done before,
Hmm.
you really want to see if it's something in their wheelhouse too.
Yep,
If
exactly.
it's something they can pull off. You know what I mean? Like if
Hmm.
they're like Kevin Rose and stuff like that, he's in the Web3 space, was Web2 early on, so obviously there's some vision there. Like
Hmm.
he's a good, probably the best case for this kind of stuff. Active in Web3 before having a project, like very prominent. So he's going to be well known. Easy to unlock a lot of doors. All that kind of stuff. Um, Now, if he did something like a restaurant or something, you probably wouldn't want to bet on him. He might still pull it off,
Yeah,
but it's just not
exactly.
in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is I think the ethos of the team really drives that kind of starting momentum. I mean, if Kevin Rose had just been like a waiter at like X, Y, or Z restaurant and he decided to start up Moonbirds and there wasn't as many big names that were working on the project, like I don't think it would have had as high of a floor price as um,
Hmm.
and I think that's important because obviously, like if you have a team of no names, which like any good team has to start somewhere, obviously. So like it could still be a great team, but I think that's a first check for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what we know, like as founders and stuff like that. Like we know going into it that you basically have to prove yourself so that
Exactly.
it's like your margin for error is much, much smaller, and people will get scared much faster. Like if your floor starts dropping, it's still you have to be much more wary of it. You gotta like, yeah. So he probably has a lot more room for error.
Hmm.
That being said, I mean, the floor dropped from like 40 to like 36 or 32 or something like that. And then he announced like there was like a coin coming out.
Yep.
And then that popped it back up. And so, I mean, there's still tricks you can do even when you're, like top of your game. But it's something to keep in mind that a lot of it's momentum driven.
Hmm.
Um, and I have an article on that we could go into, but I did want to actually break down. So we had team, like, and then also
Community.
community, and then I want to touch on Twitter, but we could jump into community too, because my take on the community too is that you really want a foundation where people enjoy being there despite anything going on. Like,
Hmm.
do people actually hang out there? Do they just type GM and they're like, when whitelist, are we is any new news? And somebody is like, no, and then they just like leave forever and like leave
Right.
again for another month.
Yeah, and the research exercise shouldn't be like a 2-minute thing. Like it shouldn't be like, oh, really quickly go to their Twitter, like hit all of the different team members' Twitters, like go into the Discord, like is it active? How many users are there? Like if you really like you're saying, Matthias, like if you really want to do some research, it's going to be like the quality of all of those things, not just the fact that they
Yeah.
exist, not just that the team has, the resume, not just that the community, that there's a lot of people in the Discord, but it's actually going to the Discord, seeing like the quality of the chat, seeing if people are engaged, like you said, if they're enjoying themselves. I mean, kind of bringing it back to Shogun War, like when the floor
Hmm.
prices were kind of down, you still saw a lot of community engagement in the Discord, and that's kind of
Yeah.
one of the things that gave me a lot of faith in the project too, was that it seemed like people just kind of genuinely enjoyed being part of the community and watching the
Hmm.
project grow. And I mean, one of the things that like you and Rygen say so often is like under promise, over deliver, right? And that's kind of been
Hmm.
the constant, like chapter by chapter of the project, is that there's been so little promising and so much over delivering. And I think that those sorts of communities, those sorts of projects are the ones that will kind of garner the best community, the most active community.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, even some of these like punks or apes or whatever have been through down cycles, or the Azukis were sitting at 5 ETH for a while. Like these
Hmm.
different things. Like this 5 ETH is still a lot of money, but if it's down and like in dumps for a little while, you kind of see where the community shakes out a bit and
Hmm.
how committed people are.
Yeah, you
Um,
see the true supporters.
Exactly. And you see a lot of this kind of stuff like that you need to be checking like, oh, okay, the founder has 200, or whatever, like has 20,000 followers or whatever, right? But if he
Mhm,
posts something, does anybody respond? Like real engagement metrics, like they do with basically if you're going to take on an influencer for advertising, that's what they
mhm.
start looking for, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that was the community point. Did you want to touch on the Twitter point a little bit?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I was just gonna say on the community stuff too. Like, there's definitely stuff that you should watch out for if you're in the community and you're sitting in there. Let's say you're in a project and you're
Mhm,
sitting in there, and like these guys come in and they're like, "We're, we got something bullish coming soon." Eyeballs, eye emojis, and
mhm,
then like everyone's like, "Oh, wow, that's like hype," and then people are speculating, and then they come back next week and they're like, oh yeah, something, where we definitely have something big with a new partner, like eye emojis and like,
Hmm.
there's all this like mystery that they're doing. They're really just stringing you along. Like
Yeah.
they don't have anything coming. They're just trying to they see the price going down and they're looking for something, or they're just gonna plain rug you. Like there's
Yeah,
no
because so much of it is hype driven, like you said, and momentum driven. I think that there's something to be said about a little bit of mystery because I kind of
Mhm,
do like these projects with an air of mystery to them. But I think
for
that there's a
sure.
difference between like mystery being the theme of the project and mystery just being the means of communication, especially like
Right.
a means for driving up the price, driving up the hype. Because then, like, all of a sudden that partner is like someone that you've never heard of before. And it's like, okay, like they were just trying to drive up the price. Now everyone
Mhm.
has kind of lost confidence, especially when they do that over a period of like 3 weeks, where they're just like constantly like, oh, like we have some pretty bullish news like one day, and then a week later they're like some big name partner eyeball emoji, like you said, and then a week later like they drop the name and everyone's like, who the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of
Yeah.
times I think a lot of these things are real. They look very similar until you've been, rugged or you've been in the space for a long time and you go like, "Oh, okay. Like that pitch isn't a fastball, it's a knuckleball." Like that it look, whatever. Like
Exactly.
to pull out some baseball analogies and shit.
Gotta
But
talk about
definitely
sports for
interesting.
any podcast to be popular, right?
Yeah, I love in the Twitter, like, sometimes people will go on the Twitter threads and stuff like, "Explain this like it's a soccer analogy," or "Explain this like it's a football analogy," or whatever, like, explaining this in football terms, like, basically the quarterback stole the ball and ran away.
And
But
they
it's
never saw him
interesting.
again.
Yeah, exactly, like, but it's interesting to see how often, founders will, like, be in the Discord, just even shooting the shit, like, because
Yeah.
you'll see that with a lot of them, like, they don't, and it kinda shows, like, the community can take over, which is kind of another thing I like to touch on community. If you see a project that's, we all like decentralization, and we're kinda here for that,
Hmm.
but if you see a project that's like shooting for decentralization too quickly, it's really actually going to undermine the project.
Yeah,
So,
it has to have some
yeah.
direction up front, right? Like you have to
Hmm.
steer, even though the theme of Web3 is decentralization, like these
Yeah,
projects, they have to have legs. And if they don't have someone kind of steering the boat before it sails, then they're just gonna shipwreck. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
It's
Yeah.
it's like trying to plan a vacation with like five buddies and nobody wants to be like the one to pick the hotel.
Yeah, and then you just
You know,
end up
and
never
coordinate and pay,
you just end up
like,
never
yeah.
going on the vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just like, "Fuck it," like, nobody's so you need, like, a benevolent dictator in the beginning, in my opinion, where it's
Hmm.
like, you're taking feedback for sure, and I was just listening to a podcast with, Brian Armstrong about this, but, you're kind of like, as the CEO, you have this responsibility to basically make the right decision, take
Hmm.
some feedback, but ultimately, like, it's your company, you know?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
or it's your project, like, with us, like, it's our reputations there,
Hmm.
even, all these docs, but, like, the rest of us, like, with pseudonymity, like, we still like, if I ever wanna be, this, online personality, like, you literally, like, cannot, do a bad job and then walk away from it. People
Yeah.
will remember.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what we've talked about a lot too. Is just, your ethos is kind of this graduate. It's like building a house, right? Like the first project you do is that kind of first brick. The second brick that you get up there, you get a little bit more confidence that this thing that you're building has a little bit more stability, right? So it's like every project is
Yeah.
another brick. And every time you lay one more brick down, I think people become a little bit more confident in the project. Wow, we're really
Yeah.
analogy heavy this this podcast.
I
We're
hope it
just
makes more sense that way, like, I
yeah,
like to
exactly.
throw those in there.
Yeah,
But,
just
I mean,
we're actually
it's
both
something.
poets. We have no Web3
Yeah,
experience. Yeah.
exactly. I'm not even sure what this crypto stuff is, but
Yeah.
I think it's tricky because you really have to see a few of these pitches, and now we're just doing the analogies on purpose, but you really like have to see these like a couple times to see like there's a different flavor to like when it's like they're like I was saying like they're trying to decentralize too quickly. They're like, oh, okay, can somebody from the community do like does anybody code here? Like, does anybody, do this? Can you do that? And
Mhm.
they're starting to like, they're basically just putting responsibilities on the community,
Mhm.
because they don't plan on doing. And there's a few rugs that have just basically been like that, where they're soft rugs, and then they're just like, oh yeah, we're just actually giving the project over to the community, meaning we're literally just rugging and leaving. And I hope this is like a softer
Y
letdown.
Yeah, that's so annoying too. It's
Yeah,
just like
they don't
the
leave the treasury.
I mean, you hope like no matter what is that the project that the team just sees the thing through. You know what I mean? And the
Mhm.
team has to have that conviction. Like, we're gonna try to run the ball all the way to the end zone. They're not gonna just drop the ball at the 15-yard line. Wow, these analogies are really becoming purposeful. I need to
Yeah,
stop.
I know, right? These are fun.
Yeah, but I mean, you,
We'll
you
just
just
get
want to have
wilder
the
with them.
yeah, exactly. You just want to have that confidence that the team is actually convicted that they're actually want to bring that project all the way to the finish line. Because if you are starting to lose some confidence in that, maybe it's time to start thinking about whether or not that's a community you want to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something to think about too, if you start, I like to recommend to people, like, if you're not technical, you need to be good with like social cues and looking for stuff,
100%. It's like that
you know,
EQ, the emotional quotient, rather
yeah.
than like your IQ. If you don't have the technical skills in life, a lot of people can survive off of a strong EQ.
That's exactly what I've basically done on all these projects where I've done well, or even tokens. Like, you know, the evaluation side is just like you look at them, you listen to a podcast about them, like where they're on it, explaining their vision, explaining what
Hmm.
they're trying to do. Look at the tokenomics. Does that make sense? Okay, good. If the code base is still just like completely a rug, you're gonna fall into it. But that type of founder will show up completely different than somebody that's in it for the long run, completely committed, and just totally different. Like they just show up differently.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, and the thing I was going to say too is something to think about is thinking about it from the founder's viewpoint. You should be looking for realistically like how long they're looking to run some of these things.
Yeah.
Especially in like NFTs or DeFi or in some of the GameFi stuff. Like
Hmm.
you know, is it they want to make this game forever, or is it this game is like then part of like there's going to be a next iteration? You
Hmm.
can't imagine they're going to run, whatever kind of flappy donkey GameFi,
Well,
whatever
you're
for 30 years,
you've become
like
really good at just making up project names.
yeah, that's trademark. So nobody started that project there, but
What was the one
um,
from
you
the
know,
last project or last podcast? Crazy Cookie Crabs.
yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot of good ones. And honestly, these are probably real names and I just don't even know.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like you can see that where you're like, oh, how long do you think that this project or this thing could really go for?
Hmm.
Because realistically, none of these guys are gonna run it for 30 years.
Yeah.
Six
No, true.
months is even pretty good, or a year. Like
Yeah, and it's kind
so.
of like, bringing it back to another analogy. I think at this point, most of our listeners have stopped listening because of all the analogies. But I think bringing it back to another analogy too, it's kind of building that ship, giving it some direction and then letting it sail. Like I think a lot of these
Mhm.
projects, once they have those stable legs, once they've, already established themselves, they can kind of sail on their own. They still need some direction and they still need some oversight, but I think that the onus can kind of be shifted, maybe not entirely, but it can be shifted from the founders down to the community at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a good example of this is TFL,
Hmm.
Terraform Labs, started Terra and all this kind of stuff. But Doe, as the founder, is very steadfast. He'll, you ask him a question, like, I mean, computer science background
Hmm.
too, Stanford grad. Like, but if you listen to his interviews, you can see like it's not like when somebody asks him like, well, so what about this, he's like, oh, we're really gonna just get feedback from the community and we'll figure, like whatever kind
Hmm.
of wishy-washy answers. He's like, we already thought of that, there's a plan. He might not even tell you what the plan is, but he's like, there's a plan, we have it. Or he'll explain like the whole rundown of how it
Hmm.
works. And you can tell the confidence there is
Hmm.
not somebody that's like, oh, okay, good, now I'm a billionaire, I'm in a rug, like I'm gone you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. No,
so
it's true too. I mean, the team, I think a good team at some point has to sit down and talk about, how do we stabilize this project in a way that we can kind of take our
Mhm.
hands off it a lot more. Because I mean, ultimately I think a lot of teams are trying to, unless you're rugging, unless you're just trying to make your money and dip, I think a lot of teams are actually trying to build something and then move on and build something else, but not necessarily let their hand be like, all right, like now we want you guys to fail. It kind of has to be like, have we created something that can run on its own? Because if it
Mhm.
can't, then like maybe we should stick around and strategize how we can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think like there's other good examples of like Vitalik. Like, I
Hmm.
think he's just really good by being kind of unassuming and letting people flourish in the way they want to, and contributing, getting everybody kind of contribute. He's not so much like a figurehead leader, even though like he's not like Doe. He's a different like flavor of good
Mhm.
leader. But he also has a very specific vision for Ethereum. Like it's not like he's gone, but he's also making sure it's like, it's not just him.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, different flavors of it. And then Bitcoin obviously has, no known founder, well, Satoshi or whatever, but um something to keep in mind for a lot of these, being able to identify a good team is key, because sometimes they look very similar to a really bad team.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. And it's an interesting point that you brought up too about like the different flavor, because I think, another thing too is maybe coming in as a project team, you can't be too stubborn about what you want your game to end up like, because I mean, I'm using GameFi specifically, but I mean this
Mhm,
applies to everything. I know that like with Shogun War, you, Reg, and Ollie, all of you guys have said that this game has kind of turned out to be something completely other than what you guys pictured it being when you first started, and
mhm.
you kind of have to have the confidence to be able to work in an unknown direction. Like you're working forward to building this thing, you want it to be successful, but kind of a product of maybe resources, a product of not dilemmas necessarily, but just unforeseen instances that kind of, not, I don't want to make this sound negative by any means, but just
Mhm.
throw off the direction of the project. You have to be able to continue to build and kind of have the confidence to keep walking down that path that you didn't expect to be walking on. Um,
Yeah,
and I think
for
that's
sure.
kind of,
Because
I think that's what you're kind of what you're getting at too, right? It's like you kind of just have to let the project flourish, let it like be kind of form itself and become its own thing, and still continue to work on it and not be like, oh well, this isn't what we imagined, like let's just scrap everything and go back to what we were trying to do in the first place, because I think that can be really that can really halt the project of the product process progress. There we go. That
yeah.
can really halt the progress of the project. Sorry, a lot of PR words there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it totally, like, a couple points on that. I think one is, like, some people have different investment philosophies on, like, where I definitely think betting on the jockey and not the horse, so, like, betting on
Hmm.
the team, not the idea, is a much better system, because if you run a project, 9 times out of 10, it's not really a lack of ideas, it's a lack of execution that really
Right.
gets you across the finish line. It's like the team, can they deliver? Like, um and then, if you're betting on like, oh, that's a great idea, but the team's bad, they're not going to be able to get done. And if you bet on a good team with a bad idea, they'll just kind of figure it out, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No,
So,
it's like what we've been talking about. It's kind of that ethos, right? I mean, I think a team that has
yeah.
no experience might have a little bit more trouble executing when they're in on shaky ground than a team that has that experience and has been there before.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with NFTs, especially though, like it's an interesting area because it's so new,
Hmm.
that people that maybe don't know what they're doing completely, or this is their first time, or basically like they're just crazy enough to try,
Hmm.
do hit home runs. And you're like, oh, this is a crazy talented person that just was like not discovered yet. That's
Hmm.
amazing. But those people aren't every project. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
it's kind of hard. It just depends on, and if you're a VC and you want 1 out of 10 to be, a mega winner, then you're fine. But if you're retail and you need to really measure your bets, then you can't really go with that. You might need to take less returns for more safety.
Hmm.
And then the other thing I was going to say too is, I think making sure that the team is kind of going hands off at the right time.
Hmm.
Like, so you don't want to go too early, but you don't want to go too late where then the community is muted and they're just like, okay, they're looking up to the leaders to be like, what do we do next? And
Yeah.
you want to engender that creativity there.
Yeah, it's kind of like a man to fish versus teach a man to fish analogy, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a right time to kind of let go, because you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? And like at a certain point, the community is just kind of, I
I
know
love our analogies. We're just
it's
stacking them.
nonstop today. I don't know what happened. I feel
We
like
got on
every
a roll.
podcast we're just in a completely different like wavelength than the last
Yeah,
podcast. But
it's
yeah, no,
amazing.
I love it. No, but I mean, like you don't want to train your community to rely on you. I think that's an important
Hmm.
note.
Yeah, and you have to be open to collaboration without diluting your like idea and your
Hmm.
values and stuff like that. But too, with like, because we had to do it basically self-funded, no raise, no VCs, no nothing. So
Hmm.
you kind of have to go like, okay, what you have to get creative. Like, what is fun but not expensive?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
there's expensive fun things and then there's non-expensive fun things. And so you kind of have to get creative a bit more. If you have a bunch of VC money and you have a bunch of like runway and whatever, or you did like a 2.5 ETH raise, like, okay, well, you got a lot of runway, but you have to figure out, you have to play, it play to your strengths.
Yeah, exactly. And
Cool.
then I
I think
think
that was community, right?
yeah, that was
We wanted to
community.
do Twitter.
The last one that I thought, actually, no, let's hit Twitter real quick, and then we could touch on the last point that I wanted to
Okay,
make.
cool. I just want to make a comment on Twitter because being around like when first getting into crypto and you're like looking through Twitter and stuff, um, you have to realize that people fit into different buckets when they're on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of those, like not most of that's probably not good for you. I mean, it depends like what you can glean from a lot of these different ones, but let's say like one bucket is people that are just there to like they're just shit posting and they're just fooling around. I mean, maybe they're OGs, maybe they're not.
Mm-hmm.
With that case, like we're like trying to get some alpha from them and they're dropping it on Twitter, they're most likely not going to drop it on Twitter until they're like even ready to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
They have probably a Discord group chat, something where they're already discussing it and they're already invested and they're already set up, they're
Mm-hmm.
positioned already. They're not really going to drop that like pre-alpha on Twitter or alpha on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
You still can. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't make money on it. I've definitely FOMO'd into stuff like just hearing it on Twitter. You just can't be last.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree.
you know.
And that's another important note too that we could probably talk about another time, because I don't want to spend the entire podcast talking about the one article. I mean, we could, and I don't mind doing that because it's all been juicy stuff. But
Yeah.
the other point that I think is important too is like Discord management, because
Hmm.
just talking about how a lot of the alpha gets leaked in Discord first and then kind of makes its way onto Twitter when people are ready to talk about it. I think it gets kind of cumbersome being in
Hmm.
a million different channels on Discord. And there's a lot of good threads out there. And maybe we can talk about it on another podcast about kind of how to manage your Discord and maybe modify your Discord, customize it in a way that's most efficient for you to kind of sift through what's going on and still be active in those communities.
Yeah, I've heard of some actually really good strategies where people would set up their own Discord and they would basically like plug in other Discord announcements into the one Discord where they would then just like plow through the announcements and like or updates or whatever, and they'd be like, oh, okay, cool, like
Yeah, and it kind
they're
of
up
ends
to
up
date.
becoming like a news aggregator, and you can kind of just sift through it
Exactly.
daily. And yeah, no, I think that's a good strategy, and that's one of the
That's
things that
probably
I've seen
like
on
an
Twitter
app or
threads too.
something.
Yeah,
It's probably going to be
definitely.
like a thing. I had to talk to Ollie about that. Hey, could you
Ollie
spin
probably
that up
already
real quick?
created it. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a million of those like ideas. He's like, yeah, that's probably $100 million company. I just don't want to do it. I'm like, great,
Yep.
perfect. Well, I'll
Classic.
just stay poor apparently. Okay, that's fine, Ollie. Very, very kind of messed up, but okay.
Thank you, Ollie.
Yeah, yeah.
So, anyways, you wanna touch on something? We can kind of work our way off this, unless you had any more points you
Yeah,
wanted
for
to talk
sure.
about.
The one I was gonna say, and it does kind of tie in, but because it is on Twitter, there is alpha on Twitter.
Hmm.
Um, but it is kind of like the lens with which you kind of look at things and you're seeing kind of public sentiment. Like people can't keep it out of their Twitter feeds so much, but you have to kind of be able to like learn to filter that and really filter it down for something that's like usable. Um,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
so yeah, that's the kind of trick, because some of the people. So sorry, the first bucket is like you maybe could get some alpha and they're OGs and they're you find it faster than some other retail, then you're good.
Hmm.
The other bucket is like they're just paid shills. Like it's just not. You're never gonna get alpha from them, and you're
Hmm.
always gonna be at exit liquidity. Like they're either bots or you find out like you can literally pull up how much it costs to pay them to shill your project. Like it's very
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah,
Jack
and
has the
another
has a list.
another note too on that subject, the subject of Twitter. I think the more and more you are on Twitter, the more and more you kind of get used to the way how the machine works,
Hmm.
so to speak. I think the more and more you kind of start to get a sense for alpha that's not specifically in one tweet. It's maybe the aggregate of perception, the aggregate of sentiment that you see. You know what I mean? Like it's not just going to
Hmm.
one account and seeing like, oh, buy like this project looks really interesting, like I'm going to put a bunch of money into it. It's kind of seeing, you know working your way, like making your own mind map, basically kind of looking at the subtotal of tweets that have to do with that project. Like what is the mixture of sentiment? Is it forward? Is it negative forward? Like one person could think one thing, another person could think another thing, and it's kind of being able to look at both of those things and develop your own sort of investment thesis.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing I've seen is like where you can follow a lot of devs and just see what they're like. They kind of will drop alpha because they don't know not to. Like they're just like genuinely curious and interested
Mm-hmm.
and like just they want to tell people about stuff. So they'll be like, oh man, this whatever. I can't believe that people are still using XYZ when this is coming out and it's actually going to reduce fees and it's going to be cheaper, faster, better. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't even know that was like a project, or oh, is that out yet? And it's like, oh yeah, mints tomorrow, or ICOs tomorrow, or whatever. It's like, oh okay, I can actually get in still. But it's
Yeah,
you have to kind of like filter that stuff down and really kind of see these coming a little bit more with just kind of repetitions, I think.
yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, cool. Oh, and then that was gonna lead me to there's actually a person on here called so their handle is at punk9059. I was actually just reading their post actually before getting on here, but
Mm-hmm.
um they were talking about basically that NFTs are very momentum driven. And
Mm-hmm.
then they, I don't know, they have a female punk, I guess, but they actually were giving you kind of like stats for it. So they back it up with basically with stats. So if you're looking at something, you can look at their chart and or sorry, she gives you a chart, or I'm not gonna assume it's a woman, so I'm just gonna go with she. But anyways,
Yeah, let's just keep saying she.
yeah, like it's just gonna mess me up if I go back and forth. But anyways, if it's down, so for most NFT projects, if it's down today, it's probably going to be down tomorrow, and that trend will break at some point. But
Mm-hmm.
it's most likely, so like on one, I think it was Crypto Punks. If it's down today, then the chance that it's going to be down tomorrow is about 56%.
Oh,
So
geez.
yeah, so it's a pretty big difference, right? Like if you just
Yeah.
were like, oh, okay, it's down, I'm not going to buy in, because contrary to like a lot of like, oh, buy the dip and stuff on tokens, it kind of doesn't work that way with NFTs for the most part.
No, and it's
Um,
an interesting point too. I mean, it is
yeah.
it's kind of the conclusion that, Web3 is getting to the point where we do kind of have some historical data to work off of. I mean, I think when that was
Hmm.
infantile, it was kind of a lot of guessing, but there's you see a lot of teams working together to kind of break down certain NFT projects, and they now that we have the historical data to form sort of not predictions necessarily, but statistics, like statistical analysis to
Hmm.
inform our investing decisions. I mean, I think, the investors are becoming they have a little bit more power in their hands.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people that are going to use like Nansen to look at things, and you do have some tools nowadays that like basically are getting the firepower that like the VCs had and you didn't, and or
Hmm.
like big kind of smart money. Because like with Nansen, you can actually track wallets. You can track like you can kind of look through. There was a good podcast with the Lau brothers and the
Hmm.
founder of Nansen on like how they kind of go through things, and you can see like so somebody says, like there's a seed round, like what XYZ project announces seed round by, A16Z and, three arrows and whatever, right? And then some other ones that are not listed. You can find who's actually on it because you find the other wallets and, like you can kind of track the tokens and you can track their wallets a bit.
Hmm.
Um, so it's good to do that kind of stuff so you can see where stuff's going.
Hmm.
Um, but it wasn't always available like that.
Yeah.
I was gonna mention so the same pattern, they say, same patterns is true with doodles, clones, toads, cool cats, and many other sets. So if it goes up though, it's also most likely to go up again the next day. So
Interesting. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's funny. It's like this slippery slope kind of inverted too. I mean, if a project goes down one day, it's a 56% chance it'll go down the next day. And then if it goes down the next day, it's just kind of a slippery slope. But I guess it does work
Hmm.
the other way too. And then we're seeing that a lot with, like moonbirds and some of the other projects that are relatively new, but relatively successful. And no, I mean, I think it's a fair, I don't want to say fair point, like it was an idea that you came up with, but
I'm a
it's
genius.
definitely,
There we go. No,
yeah,
it's my,
yeah,
it's our podcast. We can say whatever we want.
yeah.
No, but it
I
was
should say
great
it's
what
a
they came
powerful
up with.
point. Yeah, like
Yeah,
it gives you some
it's a
more
good
insight
point.
into what to look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the exceptions to the rules were basically Azukis and apes, and they were not always correlated like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I can pull up. So Azuki's, it actually went 48, 48, 44.
Mm-hmm.
That basically you had down. So if it was down one day, so basically it was 48% chance, 48.9, that if it was down today, it would be up tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then if it was, if it went down, it was actually just going to go down again. It was less likely. And then the up day on one day and then up the next day was a 50% chance. So you could, but that's on. So the upside is kind of different. The upside momentum has a different profile
Mm-hmm.
than the downside momentum, I think.
Yeah, it's working against a little bit more opposite force.
Yeah, it's interesting because even if you take like Doodles, theirs was, if it was up and then up 52,
Mm-hmm.
52% chance compared to up down 47.
Yeah.
So, but their down then up would be like a 41 to 55 that it goes, it switches
Yeah, and
versus down down.
it leaves you kind of wondering what the correlation to the uncorrelation, like
Yeah.
that the
Mhm.
certain projects don't correlate with that analysis. It's like, what is the correlation between those projects?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I think it definitely um has something to do with it. You can kind of see people are chasing a bit. You know what I mean? They're
Mm-hmm.
chasing. They're like, oh, okay, like, oh, that's a hot project. All right, I'm going in. Oh, but I don't know if I'm buying the top. And then it keeps going a little bit, and you're like, okay, I'm going in. And then the
Yeah.
bottom, people find faster. I think, where they're
Mm-hmm.
like, they
It's
get
probably like
scared faster.
project lifetime too. At a
Yeah.
certain point, certain projects don't get spoken on as much on different mediums like Twitter and whatnot. And at that
Yeah.
point, I think that there's a little bit, you have a little bit more working against you for upswings, a little bit more working against you for downswings. So I do think that
Mhm.
a piece of that is probably the how long the project's been around for.
Yeah, I mean, the buying is faster than selling, of course, in NFTs.
Hmm.
That as well. Like you can always kind of buy faster and sell slower. Um, and yeah, so it's just kind of interesting. I think Azuki's and Apes were the only exceptions.
Hmm.
Um, but I think you can kind of see that they're a little bit different than the rest of them too.
Hmm.
With that in mind, it's a little bit different, like the blue chips. Although the other ones aren't blue chips, like clones and doodles and cool cats,
Hmm.
but when you think of these, it's like, you know, there is kind of different brackets, I would say, a little bit.
Yeah, it becomes a more established market.
Yeah, and you could say the buyers are different. Like, well, if somebody starts up a crypto fund, they're probably going to buy punks,
Hmm.
and and Bored Apes. Maybe they even skip punks now, and Fidenzas and those kind of things that were a little bit more popular previously.
Hmm.
And they just go for more of the new school, Bored Ape, Zukis, and like. So yeah, lots of different stuff. Definitely not cracked.
Yeah.
Haven't figured it out just yet.
Yeah, and I think those things kind of start to, and let me know if this kind of aligns with your opinion, but I feel like those
Mm,
projects that have been running for a lot longer, they have bigger investors in them, the value's really high, it stayed high. I think those projects kind of transition from, a quick profit to kind of a store of value
yeah,
in this
yeah.
space.
It's definitely interesting to see, like, because a lot of this is just so fluid that
Hmm.
it's kind of wild what kind of can go down to, because like you see like somebody posts like we were laughing about that, I think, the other day, like if you post something with more than 5 parts, people assume you're a gigabrain, and it's just like
Yeah.
true,
That's why I keep
like,
that's why I keep all of my threads down to exactly 4 parts so that no
yeah.
one thinks I'm Giga Chad.
Yeah, people read it and they're like, "Oh, this makes sense."
Yeah.
And said 5 parts. They're like, "I'm not starting that." It's either I'm happy for you or I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
And I'm moving on.
Love that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think it's what's really interesting about the space though is that it's so young and so new. It does feel like a gold rush. Like people
Hmm.
can make it. It's a little bit of like they get sentimental or something, like the American
Hmm.
dream of like, okay, anybody in Web3 really can make it, whether it's in DeFi or crypto, or whether it's in DeFi or tokens and stuff like that, or
Hmm.
NFTs. Sorry, but you know it it will get harder and harder. So if you're thinking about it, getting into it, you need to get into it now, because
Yeah.
there's people I'm sure that you talk to at investment banks and stuff like that. That these
Hmm.
guys are smart, they are sharks, they're driven. They maybe just haven't had that light bulb go on for them to
Hmm.
where they see it. But they will. It just will just be at some point, and then that's who you're competing with. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. It just has to have some life to it. I think that's the thing. Like it needs to have some time and some proven profits.
Yeah, for
That
sure. Yeah, I mean,
that like
and I
one
think
guy
that's like
flipping
getting
an
there.
NFT for like $1 million profit is not, you know, one person
Mhm.
doing it, even like 1,000 people doing it, it's not going to be enough for a lot of people. It's got to be like this proven thing that works for X amount of time.
Right, exactly. I mean, you have to have like models and strategies and like,
Hmm.
hedges that you can rely on. Like how do you hedge against your moonbo or your moonbirds going down?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, sell one, I guess. Like buy one and sell one and then like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like it's not
Try to
really
get that
easy
cost
to
back.
do. Yeah, exactly. And then how do you do that with like, $100 million? Like, well,
Yeah.
you really can't.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Right. Like, and so then yeah. I mean, I think that's something that's interesting that it kind of shelters Web3 quite a
Hmm.
bit, is that the scale isn't there for people like big institutions to really take advantage.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that that's a good time for people to really like, if you're ingrained and you really put in the work, you can actually make something really pretty big of it, big out of it for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I had one project I wanted to touch on real quick if
Yeah,
you're
let's do it.
to that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down. We got. I think we can run over a little bit anyway, so we're fine. We'll
Yeah, yeah,
we'll
definitely.
loose
We
loose
have
and
no
decent.
time limit. No one's watching us
Exactly.
telling us that we can't go over an hour.
It's just for us
Um,
anyway, so we're
yeah,
good.
yeah, exactly. So this project I thought was really interesting. I think that card NFT card games are starting to become more popular. That there's already a couple projects that are on the market, but one that I thought was really cool, the artwork, kind of the idea, the mission statement. I did a little bit of research on their Discord, did a little bit of research on the website. It's called Ninetales. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't yet. What is
So
it?
they released their Genesis NFTs already, but they're doing their first phase release, which is going to be another set of NFTs, May 7th through May 10th. Um,
Hmm.
and so it's an NFT card game. The Genesis NFTs already dropped, like I said. They're trading at a floor price right now on OpenSea of zero point 0.9 ETH. So they don't have crazy big volume yet, but they do have like a really like, we were talking about websites and how like the UX on the website, the design can give you a lot of insight into the team.
Yeah.
It was built out really well, and I was reading like they just have a lot of information on there, a lot of stuff to digest. They have what the game's going to look like already. I think they already have the alpha out. They have like what the game mechanics are going to be, which are still being established, but they have like a basic set of rules. The game board looks really cool. It's a Ubisoft artist that's heading the artwork.
Oh
um
wow.
so it
Yeah.
actually it looks really cool. The Genesis NFTs are pretty cool too on OpenSea, but the idea is, I think, what kind of grabbed me. Just like another strategic card game, but their mission is to make it, not a pay to win, but a play to win. And they want strategy to be the driving force on if you're making money in the game. And so, like, obviously,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if like you put some of your token, they have a token, it's NIT. If you put some of your token into a pool before the game and then whoever wins gets all of it, I'm not sure what that mechanic looks like necessarily, but the idea is that you win, you get their token, and you cash out, right? And it's like they
Yeah.
really want the game to be strategy forward instead of just mindless and like, I paid for the best cards, so like I'm going to win every game that I play. They really want to make it fair for anyone that comes in. But it is
Hmm.
cool. I mean, all the skins, all the cards, everything's NFTs, so you own everything. They're doing their phase one. The phase one in Genesis NFT give you a bunch of benefits, like airdrops, free entry to weekly tournaments that have like pretty big prize pools. I think they're saying like the total prize pool for I don't know if it's the first tournament or the first couple, is going to be 500,000. So that's pretty $500,000. So that's pretty cool.
Wow.
Um,
No.
they do in-game earnings boost if you have the Genesis or phase one. I think they have a phase two coming out too, but with less benefits. And then the other thing I thought was interesting too is all Genesis and phase one holders will get dropped a pretty decent portion of their NIT token, which I think the Genesis get like 2.5% of the pool, and the phase one get like 5%. And even though that sounds like the phase one's getting more, it's just because there's more volume to the phase one. It's kind of like with Battlefly. And
Yeah.
so they're estimating, I think they valued themselves at like I always love saying value themselves. I think they're valued at like $20 million or something like that. And so it ends up being around $1,000 per Genesis. So if you break out the math, it looks like you basically recoup like 40% of your costs if you buy a Genesis, if you under the assumption that you actually that token's actually worth $1,000 when you get it.
Yeah.
And then the phase one gets about $220 back of their cost, which I'm assuming, those will probably go for less. So it might work out to be about recovering 40% of your cost. So your potential loss if you buy one of these is about 60% if you assume that their valuation is right. I mean, it could be higher, it could be lower. Um, and yeah, I mean, it feels like there's some upside to this, just strictly relying on their mission, strictly relying on the art, the quality of their team. Like I said, they have a Ubisoft artist that's heading their art. They have a pretty big team right now. If I were to guess, I'd say they had like 30 people on their team.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So it seems like they have some strength to their team, which will be good. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I looked at the board. They released what the board looks like. It has like kind of a weathering mechanic. It looks animated, which is really cool. Like I think a lot of the online card games kind of get boring when you're just playing on like a table. And so I think there's going to be some animation to the game, which should be pretty fun. They have a lot of cards that are going to be in the game, so it leaves it open to a lot of strategy, and it's a concurrent card game. So instead of like taking turns, you're going at the same time. Um, and they have like energy or some form of energy in the game, and like one card costs more energy than another. You have to wait for your energy to recoup, and then you can play your really strong cards. So like you could take a bunch of damage from the other player, and then at the very end play a card that takes all your energy and essentially defeat them. So it does look really cool. The cards look really well made, and the game mechanics, which I read a little bit into, seem like they are open to strategy, and the game could become really complicated. So
Yeah.
I think that they have a lot going for them. But that was one project that I thought was really interesting. So May 7th is when phase one is minting.
Dropping alpha. Phase
Yeah.
one, May 7th. I think we're seeing a lot of these like card games and different games that I think will be kind of like nicer. I think like the history of like video games is kind of playing out again in Web3. And we're kind of in the card game Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, and a Pokemon card phase of GameFi. I
Mm-hmm.
would say our game is probably closer to like chess than it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
like a Pokemon or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the layer that we had that we have now that we don't have previously is the social layer that
Right.
like you never owned part of Pokemon or a part of Nintendo or
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't own part of Magic the Gathering. You couldn't so now you can have that financial incentive, but also if you're on Discord a lot and you're talking to the community, it's the same as like having all those friends at school that played Pokemon or Magic or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's like everybody and there's 10,000 people, so it makes it
Yeah.
a bit more fun as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And like there's you could know the person that you're playing against rather than just playing an
Hmm.
online card game, and like just having like a chat box or something. Like you could get pinned up against someone on Discord that you talk to, all the time or something like that. Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
And I would urge anyone that's listening to the podcast to go check out the project. I had never heard of it before I started looking it up. I saw it in a tweet and then kind of just, was tripping down the rabbit hole and got got pretty deep on their website, and it looks really cool. So I'd urge anyone that's listening to check it out and kind of like we said before, develop your own investment thesis.
Yeah, start seeing those pitches. We'll throw in as many analogies, just string them all together.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we'll stay off those, I guess. Maybe we'll save those for next time.
I would love someone to go through our podcast and count how many analogies we use today, and then
Oh yeah, like
reply
we'll
to the
have to
Twitter
do
thread.
that like a ticker. It'll just go at the same time, like doot
Yeah,
doot doot doot. It'll just keep going
yeah,
real quick.
exactly. Uh, I mean, that
Oh
was it.
man.
That was it for me on that project. If you want, we can start closing it out.
Yeah, no, let's wrap it up. I think that's pretty good.
So
I feel like if we open up another thing, we'll be like 20 minutes deep.
yeah,
Well, yeah.
definitely. Matthias, you want to ask the whitelist question?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this a little bit, and I
Hmm.
think there was one I wanted to do earlier based off one of these. I want to basically hear if people think, or why people think that basically floors will rise faster, or like they rise and fast so fall, but they don't. The down days aren't always followed by up days. you know, it's most likely to be a down day than it is
Mhm.
a down up day. So why is it, you know, develop your own thesis and give you examples, or you know, just tell us what you think. But basically, why you think that there's so much momentum in NFTs that we don't usually see in DeFi. Why do you think there's so much momentum in NFTs?
That is the essay prompt right away. Um, no, that was a good one. I think it's a thinking man's question. It's not well go up or down. So I like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, rules to the raffle. Answer that question in the. I'm gonna post a Twitter thread with the Spotify and YouTube link to this podcast episode. And in the Twitter thread, just reply, comment, retweet the tweet, and you'll be entered into the raffle. And just make sure in the comment section you answer Matthias's question about why we think when a certain project's NFT goes down one day that it's more likely to go down the next day.
Yeah, and don't forget to leave us a like, or you know, a like or a review. That always helps out as we're growing the podcast, getting this out to more people. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And so yeah, just to reiterate, we are on Spotify now, guys. So you don't
big
have to
time.
have a YouTube video open while you're driving anymore. You can listen to us on Spotify and make it that much easier.
It's
Maybe
like a
when you're
real podcast.
yeah. I don't know if I'd like to listen to my voice 24/7 or while I'm running, but maybe one of you guys does.
Oh, we keep it erratic enough that it's like, you know, keeps people interested enough. We're not
Yeah.
too straightforward, but
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
some fun stuff happening though soon. But yeah, that's all pretty much for me. Good pod.
Yeah, and I think we forgot to mention that whitelist giveaway is for Bubble World, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't know
if
if
that
we
wasn't clear.
yeah, if that wasn't clear from the beginning, now that we're at the end of the podcast, the whitelist giveaway is for Bubble World, which, like we said before, is a really interesting project. We talked to the team, we like them. Like Matthias said, he's investing in them, so obviously he
Yeah,
believes in them. And I got a really good sense from them too. So it's exciting. They allocated us some whitelist spots, and we're going to be raffling some off in future podcasts. And like Matthias said earlier on in the podcast, that we're partnering with them through Shogun War. So will be really
yeah.
interesting to see.
My recommendation: get whitelisted and then figure out if you want to mint. That's the best route, because you don't want to figure out you want to mint and then you can't get a whitelist spot, because we had to kind of wrangle these as many as we could for the community, because I know people are going to want them.
Yeah.
So yeah, most of these are going straight to the community.
Yep. Yep.
Cool.
Anyways, had a great time podcasting as usual. Good talking to you, Matthias. And thanks guys for listening.
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye guys.